I've been to many shrines for the warriors around the world. I've been to the Octo-Finals shrine and I've seen it for what it was. Not a celebration of Japan's crimes or its actions during the Pacific War, but a memorial or a remembrance of how both the Japanese and everyone else who perished in that conflict suffered during that war. We think when you come out and you give the narrative that all of Japan, because all of Japan was militant, that all of Japan is guilty for its actions during the war, we think that reaction is never going to go well. Three truths to this truth. Firstly, how does jingoism develop? Why is Japan jingoistic? Secondly, why must we distinguish between the innocent and the guilty? Lastly, why is empathy more important than the shades of black and white that they want to paint this debate? One, how does jingoism develop? We think fundamentally, nationalist narratives and that sort of hyper-nationalism we saw in Japan at the start of World War II are the result of a country that feels humiliated, a country that feels at its mercy of outside forces who seek to impose narratives upon them that they are unwilling to accept. We think going back to Japan as a trend towards recognizing slowly that some of its soldiers committed war crimes in the course of the war, but also wants to recognize and feels that the rest of the world is unable to see that Japan suffered just as much, if not more, than any other country in that war when the atomic bomb was dropped on 2 civilian centers because of a cold calculation base that was meant to save lives. We think Japan is more likely to be unaccepting of such a message, that Japan only was the perpetrator and not at all the victim. They say the US should be able to apologize for that. That's not something you can put by composition theory into this debate, right? Because, like, presumably, we're only legislating the actions of Japan here. But more to that, so I think when Japan constantly is told as an aggressor, violence follow is far likely to react adversely. Beyond this, we also recognize that when you tell Japan is an aggressor, you need, in this message, to recognize the truth of this statement. So, focusing on Japanese war crimes, focusing on things that actually happened that's very connecting, where Japanese soldiers were actually guilty of war crimes. It's something that comparatively the Japanese public is more likely to accept as true when you recognize the truth of these statements. But on the other hand, when the statement itself is loaded with a lie, every single Japanese person, innocent or guilty, was collectively guilty of such an action. That is something that they're much less likely to be able to swallow. And that is what they are putting on the table. We think that counter-narrative of jingoism develops when people feel oppressed by outsiders. We think that sort of reasons to foreigners that they want to impose is something that we will, like, means that Japan will react poorly. We don't think they ever heard analysis on their side, right? Of like why Japan wouldn't react in such a fashion, why opposition nationalists wouldn't choose to ditch the ashes of the now burned down Yasukuni Shrine. When they do so, we think that sort of action splits Japan apart. You don't get a proper dialogue between nationalists and non-nationalists, people who are not nationalists. We think people are more likely to lean towards the nationalist side when they are more likely to believe in nationalism. Beyond this, we think, like, it's just far better to shape specific crimes, right? And now, I move to the second point. Why don't we distinguish? Thank you. Why don't we distinguish between the innocent and the guilty? What we heard from Glasgow was that these individuals were collectivists. One question is, to what extent then were these people ever autonomous and responsible for their own actions? We thought it was exactly analogous to the situation in North Korea. Because you tell us that these people are at the mercy of a state ideology, which they never consented to, right? Like, you don't actually consent to being at the mercy of a state ideology simply by being born within the bounds of Japan at a period of time. You don't consent to be enlisted into the army. And by the way, all these soldiers were conscripted and none of them were volunteers, as Japan wanted to include these trained. These people had absolutely no authority, and to tell us that therefore they are responsible for their actions was bizarre. Then they told us that Kyoto wasn't a pilot of that 2020 plane. Well, that's really strange, right? Because on one hand, they tell us that they were part of a coercive ideology that they did not consent to, and therefore apply to every single person, regardless of whether they were innocent or guilty. But on the other hand, you want to tell us that these people have some degree of moral responsibility over their actions. We think like there is a long-running debate over soldiers' individual moral responsibility. But like, in a case where they are indoctrinated or controlled or under direct orders or pain of death, that moral responsibility is absent, right? And we're not even talking about people who actually did commit war crimes, we're talking about those who didn't. We think it was bizarre to tar all of them for the same brush before it all.
In cases that we shouldn't shame individual soldiers because the culture of militarism was what caused them to commit their crimes. Why are you advocating punishing those individual soldiers, instead of shaming the culture that caused them to commit all of those war crimes?
Shaming the culture, crucially, is not the same as shaming the soldiers. Yeah. It's quite different, right? Like, you can call account to the problems with Japanese military terrorism without saying that every single soldier was morally guilty. We think they use that distinction in this debate. Because what happens when you shape all these soldiers, that people take it on an individualized, personal level? These soldiers' families, for example, feel that now they've done a greater sin than before. So, we think this idea. Then they told us the problem was, even at best, right? Like, innocent soldiers were enablers of those who are guilty because they didn't stop them. To what extent were they capable of stopping these atrocities? To what extent were they aware of these atrocities? In fact, to what extent, for example, was Yamashita responsible for the bloodshed that happened in Manila when he actually carried out direct orders not to attack Manila? We think that these questions of responsibility are something that is very easy for victors to sweep under the carpet. We think when several of the trials of Japanese generals or Japanese soldiers who committed war crimes have already been called into question by historians, because of that victor's interpretation of the narrative, we think the Japanese people are more likely to buy into the idea that this is just another example. They are not likely to accept it, and it's really important to distinguish between innocent and guilty for this reason. And here I'm going to move on to this idea of why empathy is more important than moral abstraction. What we told you this morning was that when you say soldiers are good or soldiers are evil because they all collectively committed some kind of war crime, you absolutely focus on individuals and individual actions and individual responsibility. Because now you're telling us that all of them are responsible regardless of the individual moral choices that you chose to make within that conflict. That meant, for example, that it was far more likely to cast certain leaders as evil. It's far more likely that, for example, we irresponsibly intervene in a conflict that is none of our business because we think the dictator is an evil monster. That means the norms of war become easier and easier to do. We become more and more detached from the real appreciation of the suffering that comes with war, when individuals suffer, when no one wins, towards a cold calculation, the sort of calculation that led to the United States dropping a bomb on civilian centers because they thought it would save lives in the abstract. That failed to appreciate what the suffering of war really means. We thought we didn't want that sort of dehumanization. We thought we didn't want to dehumanize the people who died, the people who lived, nor the people who did bad things. Because empathy and not moral abstraction is what prevents conflict from actually happening in your crowd.